Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. We got some unfortunate news earlier today. Geoff Neal is out of his fight against Shavkat Rakhmonov on January 14th at UFC Vegas 67. Geoff Neal had to pull out with undisclosed injuries. And, this is super unfortunate. This is a bummer. But we're going to talk about who could potentially step in and fight Shavkat Rakhmonov on short notice. It's only 2 weeks away. This was supposed to be the co-main event of the first fight card of 2023. And in my opinion, when I talked about Geoff Neal versus Shavkat Rakhmonov, I thought this should have been the main event of the card. I thought this was a better fight than Kelvin Gastelum versus Nasruddin Imavov, which was the main event of this card. And now it's canceled, so it's super unfortunate. But we're going to talk about some potential matchups for Shavkat in 2023, whether it be stepping in on short notice in 2 weeks and fighting Shavkat on that UFC Vegas 67 card, or maybe something down the line later in 2023 having to postpone Shavkat's next fight. And in particular, there's one matchup I really want to discuss, and I think a lot of hardcore fans have been fantasizing about this matchup for a while, and that's Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Khamzat Chimaev. We're going to talk about whether or not that is possible in 2023, because I've seen a lot of people discussing that possible matchup this year. So first off, you start looking at the rankings, and there's a decent amount of options here. Honestly, there is. But I feel like when you start singling out each option and each fighter that's available, it just seems unlikely in general. Because the welterweight division, I talked about this a lot on my channel, the welterweight division has been a division where nobody wants to fight each other. None of the top-ranked guys want to fight any of the other top-ranked guys. And this has been going on for like 2 or 3 years. Outside of Kamaru Usman, it seems like nobody in the welterweight division wants to fight each other. So that's why I'm saying a lot of these options are unlikely, but we're going to go through each option in the top 10. So first off, and I think this is probably the most likely option, depending on Geoff Neal's injury. And again, this is a massive what if because we don't know how injured Geoff Neal is. He pulled out with undisclosed injuries. We don't know what it is. I think there is a chance the UFC just says, you know what, we'll bite the bullet. We're taking this off the card. We're taking Shavkat off the card, and we'll reschedule them for February or March, because this is a fight a lot of people liked. It made a lot of sense. It was a perfect natural progression for Shavkat. Shavkat's currently ranked number 10. Geoff Neal's currently ranked number 7. Geoff Neal's coming off that big win against Vicente Luque. Before that, a win over Santiago Ponzinibbio. So this was just the perfect matchup. Shavkat is 16-0. He's finished every single opponent in his MMA career. So this just made perfect sense. And this Geoff Neal fight was basically setting up Shavkat to become a title contender within the welterweight division. He beats Geoff Neal, hypothetically, in a hypothetical world, he beats Geoff Neal, and then he's probably 1, maybe 2 fights away from a potential welterweight title shot. So this fight just made so much sense. And I think there is a highly likely possibility, depending on the Geoff Neal injury, that they reschedule this fight for maybe late February, early March, depending on the injury. But let's say that doesn't happen for a second. Who else can he fight? Number 9 is Vicente Luque. Could he fight Vicente Luque? Luque doesn't currently have a fight scheduled. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. Just got finished by Geoff Neal back in August. It just really doesn't make sense. And that's definitely not happening on short notice. So they would have to book that down the line. There has to be a better option than Vicente Luque. Another matchup I want to talk about that's actually not in the rankings that I know somebody's going to probably mention in the comments. Bryan Barberena said he would step in on short notice and fight Shavkat. Is that a possibility? Yes. If the UFC wants to keep Shavkat on that card, I believe they might do that. But for me personally, I don't want to see it. And I know people are going to say, well, let's see him fight. I'd rather see him fight somebody than nobody. What is that fight going to tell us? Is that fight going to tell us anything? Shavkat's definitely going to beat Bryan Barberena. Barberena's coming off, a loss to Rafael dos Anjos not that long ago. And, what's a 2-week notice Bryan Barberena going to be able to do to Shavkat? It's not going to answer any questions, and it's meaningless. For me, I'd rather Shavkat get postponed a month, 2 months, find a different opponent, rather than have him go in there and fight Bryan Barberena. And let's say, he breaks a hand punching Bryan Barberena and TKOing him and then being out for 4, 5, 6 months. That's what I'm thinking, because it's a fight that answers no questions. So I don't want to see the Bryan Barberena fight, but I think it is possible if the UFC is insistent on keeping him on that card, then it is a real possibility that happens, because I don't see a lot of other guys taking this fight on short notice. But if you go down the rest of the rankings, so you have Vicente Luque at number 9. You have Sean Brady at number 8. That's not happening. Sean Brady's coming off a TKO loss to Belal Muhammad. He also just recently had a fight announced against number 14, Michel Pereira, so that's not happening. Number 7 is Geoff Neal. We already discussed him. Number 6 is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who's coming off a big win over Kevin Holland just recently. Took a lot of damage in that fight. Broke his hand in that fight. He's not fighting anytime soon. And even if he was 100% healthy, he refuses to fight anyone who's wrestled in elementary school. He's already turned down the Shavkat Rakhmonov fight before. He would turn it down again. Then you have number 5, Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns is a slight possibility. Definitely not on the January card because he's fighting at UFC 283 against Neil Magny. So I doubt that's going to happen. But if Gilbert Burns beats Neil Magny at UFC 283, I could see Gilbert Burns being a guy. I mean, he accepted the Khamzat Chimaev fight. I could see him being a guy in 2-3 months, having a quick turnaround after Neil Magny, after the fight at UFC 283 and fighting Shavkat. But again, it's not going to happen anytime soon. And I still don't think that's super likely. Number 4, you have Belal Muhammad. This is a fight that I would absolutely love to see. It kind of makes sense. But Belal at this point, he's on a 4-fight winning streak. He hasn't lost since Geoff Neal back in 2019. He's ranked number 4 in the division. I don't know if the UFC necessarily wants to push him towards a title shot or not, but he's kind of deserving. I mean, he's kind of right there in line for a UFC welterweight title shot. But the reason I bring up Belal is not only is it an excellent fight, but also Belal has shown in the past, at least verbally online, that he's willing to fight anyone. He's been calling out Khamzat left and right. That fight has never materialized. I don't think it's because Belal's not wanting it. I think it's because the UFC probably doesn't want it or it doesn't make sense. So I would love to see Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Belal Muhammad maybe booked for UFC 285. That's what I'm looking at. UFC 285, first week of March. I think it's March 4th of 2023. I think we could see Shavkat versus Belal. I think Belal would take that fight. I think he'd be a little bit hesitant just because, he's number 4 in the rankings. He's coming off a big win. He just fought behind him, and Sean Brady finished him. And now you're going to ask him to fight Shavkat, which I don't think, is the worst matchup for him. Honestly, Shavkat's very good. A lot of people are high on him, but Shavkat, his best win is Neil Magny, okay? Let's be real. I'm very high on Shavkat. His best win is Neil Magny. Belal Muhammad has improved. He's very well-rounded. He could win that fight. I'm not counting Belal Muhammad out. I would love to see the matchup. Do I think that happens? Maybe. I think that's a real possibility, but it's hard to say, honestly. The division's kind of up in the air. Again, I think the most likely scenario is going to be Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Geoff Neal, rescheduled for either late February, early March, depending on the injury of Geoff Neal. But the Belal Muhammad fight makes a lot of sense. Belal Muhammad just took a fight against Sean Brady, who, a lot of these top-ranked welterweights aren't willing to take these fights. Belal has shown he's willing to take these fights, and he's been calling it Khamzat Chimaev. So that could happen. Number 3, and this is the fight I really want to talk about, Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Khamzat Chimaev. Do I think the UFC would make this fight? I think it's a possibility. And I know that's kind of a non-answer. If I had to say likely or not likely, I would say not likely. But let me make my argument for why the UFC should make this. And if you watched the recent live stream, you heard this argument. Throughout the last 12, 13 years that I've been watching MMA, every time we see fighter A and fighter B, and we say, oh, let's wait a couple, another year or two. I can't wait to see these two guys fight each other. Maybe they'll fight for a number 1 contender spot. Maybe they'll fight for a title. It usually never ends up happening. The one example I gave when I discussed this on my live stream was Uriah Hall versus Josh Saman. And this was a fight that a lot of people wanted to kind of see on The Ultimate Fighter. They booked them against opposite opponents so that they could meet in the finale. Josh Saman ended up getting beat by Kelvin Gastelum, never made it to the final. Uriah Hall ends up making it to the final. They never fought. Then they tried to rebook it, ended up never happening. And obviously we all know Josh passed away. I think it was back in 2016. The fight never ended up happening. And this was a fight that a lot of people wanted to see. I don't think it's at the same magnitude as Khamzat Chimaev versus Shavkat, but over history, you can name another one, GSP Anderson Silva. I know that's a little bit different. That's a little bit higher stakes because both guys were champions, welterweight champion and middleweight champion. This was a fight all the fans were dying to see. And we say, oh, well, let's get another win here and another win there. And if he beats him here and he beats him there, then we can match these two guys up. It ends up never happening. I know there's countless other examples of this. I can't think of all of them off the top of my head. But when you say, let's wait for this to happen and that to happen, and once this guy wins this fight and that guy wins this fight, and a year down the line, we're going to have these two guys fight each other for number one contender, 9 times out of 10, it ends up not happening. So what I would love the UFC to do right now, screw it. Nobody, according to Khamzat, and I'm just taking his word for it, according to Khamzat, nobody wants to fight him within the welterweight division. 4 people have turned him down. Now, I know there's probably other guys who are willing to fight him. I know that's probably not 100% accurate, but he's saying he can't get a fight. The same thing goes for Shavkat Rakhmonov. People are turning down fights with him. We know Wonderboy turned down a fight with him. He's an absolute killer. He's ranked at number 10. Khamzat has said time and time again he'll fight anyone. Now is the time. Book the fight. I think this would be one of the biggest non-title fights in the UFC. I really think it would be the biggest non-title fight of 2023. So I think the UFC is planning a mega card for UFC 285 March 4th in Las Vegas. Khamzat has openly said he wants to fight in Las Vegas. So why not book it? Why not book it? If we don't book it now, there's a chance that we never see it. And I get it. We could still see it. I would love to see it. Would I love to see it for a number one contender fight? Yes. Would I love to see it for a title fight? Yes, I would. But there's no guarantee of that. And I understand a lot of people want to see both these guys built into stars and then they can face off. But Khamzat Chimaev, I believe, is already a borderline star. And Shavkat Rakhmonov, if he goes out there and he beats Khamzat Chimaev, he would become a star. And I think this fight would be massive. And I think they're looking to build that mega card at UFC 285. Main event's probably going to be Francis Ngannou versus John Jones. I'm thinking the co-main event's probably going to be Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo. What better than a featured fight on UFC 285, a mega card, than Khamzat Chimaev versus Shavkat Rakhmonov? Book the fight, UFC. I would absolutely love it. And I'm curious what you guys think, honestly, because I do understand the thought process. You know, okay, if Shavkat went out there and beat Geoff Neal and beat him impressively, and Khamzat goes out there and maybe beats a Colby Covington, and then Khamzat fights for the title and maybe wins the title. Meanwhile, Shavkat beats Gilbert Burns, and then we could match them all. But there's a lot of what ifs. It's MMA. You never know what's bound to happen. And if I had my personal choice, and again, I said this, I don't think it's super likely. If I had my personal choice, we see Khamzat Chimaev versus Shavkat Rakhmonov at UFC 285. This would be a massive fight. I think it would help elevate the pay-per-view, and I think a lot of fans would really appreciate this fight. I think some people would complain, just saying, oh, we can't kill off a contender. I want to see him fight for a belt in 2024. And that's all fine and good. They can fight more than once. I would love to see them both tested against each other, because they're both complaining they can't get fights. So why not book them to fight each other? But again, I think the most likely scenario is going to be a rescheduling of the original fight, Geoff Neal versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. Or if I had to put a close second, I'd probably say it's Brian Barberena stepping in on short notice. And then honestly, I put Shavkat versus Belal probably higher than the Chimaev fight, just because I think the UFC is going to look at Chimaev. I think they're going to try to book him in a fight that they think he can win at 170 pounds. Shavkat, he's looked amazing, but he's still a bit of an unknown. I think the UFC is going to try to book that Khamzat Chimaev-Colby Covington fight. They're hoping, with the attention that Colby Covington brings with his personality, if Khamzat gets a win there and they look at it as probably a more winnable fight. Colby Covington's been hiding in witness protection for what seems like a year now. And I think they think, okay, Colby's going to come out of witness protection. He's going to be a little rusty. He's been hiding in the safe house for so long. Come out rusty, lose to Khamzat. Khamzat makes weight, and he fights for the title in his next fight. I think that's probably what's going to happen. So I would honestly put the Shavkat versus Belal ahead of that. But if it was up to me again, give me Khamzat Chimaev versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. Let me know what you guys think about all this down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.